Chapter 9. The Blood Bottler. Blood Bottler. Suddenly, a tremendous thumping noise came from outside the cave entrance, and a voice like thunder shouted, "Runt! Is you there, Runt? I is hearing you jabbling. What are you jabbling about? Who are you jabbling to, Runt?" "Look out," cried the BFG. "It's a blood brother. It's a blood bottler." But before he had finished speaking, the stone was rolled aside, and a 50-foot giant, more than twice as tall and wide as the BFG, came striding into the cave. He was naked except for a dirty little piece of cloth around his bottom. Sophie was on the tabletop. The enormous, partly eaten snogscumber was lying near her. She ducked behind it. The creature came clumping into the cave and stood towering over the BFG. "Who is you jabbling to here just now?" he boomed. "I is jabbling to myself," the BFG answered. "Piffle whiz," shouted the blood bottler. "Bugs wallop," he boomed. "You is talking to a human being. That's what I is thinking." "No, no, 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 no," cried the BFG. "Yes, yes, 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 yes," cried the blood bottler. "I is guessing you was snitched away a human being and brought it back to your bunghole as a pet. So now I is winkling it out and guzzling it as extra snacks before me supper." The poor BFG was very nervous. "But there's no one in here," he stammered. "Why don't you leave me alone?" And there is the big human bean-eating giant. And there is the BFG, who really doesn't look like a giant at all there, does he? The blood bottler pointed a finger as large as a tree trunk at the BFG. "Runty little scrum screwer," he shouted. "Piffling little swish figgler. Squimpy little bottle wart. Prunty little pog swiller. I is now going to search the primroses." He grabbed the BFG by the arm. "And you is going to help me do it. Us together is going to winkle out this tasteful little human being," he shouted. The BFG had intended to whisk Sophie off the table as soon as he got the chance and hide her behind his back, but now there was no hope of doing this. Sophie peered around the chewed-off end of the enormous snogscumber, watched the two giants as they moved away down the cave. The blood bottler was a gruesome sight. His skin was reddish pink. There was black hair sprouting on his chest and arms and on his tummy. The hair on his head was long and dark and tangled. His foul face was round and squashy looking. The eyes were tiny black holes. The nose was small, but the mouth was huge. It spread right across his face, almost from ear to ear. And it had lips that were like two gigantic purple frankfurters, lying one on top of the other. Craggy yellow teeth stuck out between the two purple frankfurter lips, and rivers of spit ran down over his chin. Ew, nasty, eh? It was not in the least difficult to believe that this ghastly brute ate men, women and children every night. The blood bottler, still holding the BFG by the arm, was examining the rows and rows of bottles. "You and your pibbling bottles," he shouted. "What is you putting in there?" Nothing that would interest you," the BFG answered. "You is only interested in guzzling human beings." "And you is as dotty as a dog's waggler," cried the black bottler. Soon the black bottler would be coming back, Sophie told herself, and he was bound to search the tabletop. But she couldn't possibly jump off the table. It was 12 feet high. She'd break a leg. The snogscumber, although it was as thick as a perambulator, was not going to hide her if the blood bottler picked it up. She examined the chewed-off end. It had large seeds in the middle, each one as big as a melon. They were embedded in a soft, slimy stuff. And taking care to stay out of sight, Sophie reached forward and scooped away half a dozen of these seeds. This left a hole in the middle of the snogscumber large enough for her to crouch in so long as she rolled herself up into a ball. She crawled into it. It was wet and slimy hiding place. But what did that matter if it was going to save her from being eaten? The blood bottler and the BFG were coming back towards the table now. The BFG was nearly fainting with fear. Any moment, he was telling himself, Sophie would be discovered and eaten. Suddenly, the blood bottler grabbed the half-eaten snozzcumber. The BFG stared at the bare table. Sophie, where is you? He thought desperately. You cannot possibly be jumping off that high table, so where is you hiding, Sophie? So this is the filthy, rotsome glubbage you is eating, boomed the blood bottler. Hold up, the partly eaten snozzcumber, you must be cockles to be guzzling such rub squash. And for a moment the blood bottler seemed to have forgotten about his search for Sophie. The BFG decided to lead him further off the track. That is a scrum-diddly scrumptious snozzcumber, he said, eyes guzzling gleefully every night and day. Is you never trying a snozzcumber, blood bottler? Human beans is juicier. You is talking rummy trot, the BFG said, growing braver by the second. He was thinking that if only he could get the blood bottler to take one bite of the repulsive vegetable, the sheer foulness of its flavour would send him bellowing out of the cave. I is happy to let you sample it, the BFG went on, but please, when you see how truly scrumptious it is, do not be guzzling the whole thing. Leave a little snitchet for my supper. The blood bottler stared suspiciously with small piggy eyes at the snozzcumber. Sophie, crouching inside the chewed-off end, began to tremble all over. You is not switch-fiddling me, is you, said the blood bottler. Never, cried the BFG passionately. Take a bite and I'm positive you'll be shouting about, oh, how scrump-diddly-ish, scrumptious and this wonder veggies. The BFG could see the greedy blood bottler's mouth beginning to water more than ever at the prospect of extra food. Vegetables is very good for you, he went on. It is not healthsome always to be eating meaty things. Well, just this once. I is going to taste these rotsome eats of yours, but I am warning you that if it is filsome, I is smashing it over your sludgy little head. And he picked up the snozzcumber. He began raising it on its long journey to his mouth some 50 feet into the air. Sophie wanted to scream, don't. But that would have been an even more certain death. And crouching among the slimy seed, she felt herself being lifted up and up and up. Suddenly, there was a crunch as the blood bottler bit a huge hunk off the end. Sophie saw his yellow teeth clamping together a few inches from her head. Then there was utter darkness. She was in his mouth. She caught a whiff of his evil-smelling breath. It stank of bad meat. She waited for the teeth to go crunch once more. She prayed that she would be killed quickly. Roared the blood bottle. And then he spat. And all of the great lumps of snozzcumber that were in his mouth, as well as Sophie, went shooting out across the cave. If Sophie had struck the stony wall of the cave, she would have most certainly been killed. Instead, she hit the soft folds of the BFG's black cloak hanging against the wall. She dropped to the ground, half stunned. She crawled under the hem of the cloak, and there she crouched. You little swine bugler, roared the blood bottler. You little pig swiller. He rushed at the BFG and smashed what was left of the snozzlecumber over his head. Fragments of the filthy vegetable splashed all over the cave. You is not loving it? The BFG asked innocently, rubbing his head. Loving it, yelled the blood bottler. This is the most disgustous taste that is ever collecting my teeth. You must be buggles to be swallowing sludge like that. Every night you could be galloping off happy as a hamburger and gobbling juicy human beings. Eating human beings is wrong and evil, the BFG said. It is guzzly and glumptious, shouted the blood bottler. And tonight I is galloping off to Chile to swallow a few human Chile beans. Is you wishing to know why I is choosing Chile? I is not wishing to know anything, the BFG said. I is choosing Chile because I is fed up with the taste of the Arctic. It is important I have plenty of cold eats in this scuttling hot weather, and the next coldest thing to Arctic is the Chile bean. Humans from Chile is very chilly. Horrible, the BFG said. You ought to be ashamed. Other giants is all saying that they wanted to gallop off to England tonight to guzzle school chidlers, the blood bottler said. I is very fond indeed of English school chidlers. They has a nice inky booky flavour. Perhaps I'll change my mind and go to England with them. You is disgusting, the BFG said. And you is an insult to the giant peoples, shouted the blood bottler. You is not fit to be a giant. You is a squinky little squiddler. You is a pibbling little pipsqueak. You is a green puff nut. And with that, the horrible blood-bottling giant strode out of the cave, and the BFG ran to the cave entrance and quickly rolled the stone back in place. Sophie, he whispered. Sophie, where is you, Sophie? Sophie emerged from under the hem of the black coat. I'm here, she said. The BFG picked her up and held her tenderly in the palm of his hand. Oh, I is so happy to be finding you all in one lump, he said. I was in his mouth, Sophie said. You was what? Sophie told him what happened. And there I was telling him to eat the filsome snozzcumper, and you was all the time inside it. Not much fun, Sophie said. Just look at you, you poor little chidler, cried the BFG. You was all covered in snozzcumper and giant spit. He set about cleaning her as best he could. I is hating those other giants more than ever now, he said. You know what I would like to do? What? Sophie said. I should like to find a way of disappearing them, every single one. I'd be glad to help you, Sophie said. Let me see if I can't think of a way of doing it. And that's the end of that chapter. See you soon.